Hello there. Well, here it is, another Friday in time for an anomaly. Today's anomaly I'm calling the happiness anomaly, and it's partly because of our friend Carl Sandburg. As I told you, when I started teaching poetry, I didn't know enough. I just didn't know enough. So every day was a kind of a surprise for me when I was teaching poetry the first time. But in the textbook that I was using, that the students were using, that I was learning from, that they were learning from, there was a poem from Carl Sandburg called Happiness. It was in the back parts of the book, and so I copied it onto the board because I wanted the students to copy it down into their notes and to think about it. I like thinky things, and especially when I was a young teacher, I liked it for students to consider what he was saying and what he was emphasizing in that poem. So it was on that week that I first hit my meter lessons. And so I was working with my students and I was trying to figure out how to explain to them that some syllables are more stressed than others in the English language. And it's a relatively simple lesson, but some students really struggle with it. They have trouble hearing it. And in English, there's actually shadings of emphasis, shadings of stress. But I was really just trying to get the kids to identify two levels of stress, either strong or weak stress. That was it. But that poem was up on the board. And so I said, okay, let's take a word. And I turned around, and there was the title of the poem, written large, Happiness. And I said, where does the heaviest stress, without saying it, kids, where do you think the heaviest stress goes on that word? And they all sat there and we looked at each other, and I said, okay, if you think the stress goes on the heaviest stress goes on the first syllable, raise your hands. And a few students raised their hands. Now, if you think the heaviest stress goes on the second syllable, raise your hands. And more students raised their hands on the second syllable. And I said, anyone who thinks the heaviest stress goes on the last syllable, raise your hands. And a couple of students raised their hands. So the most votes went to the middle syllable. Now, I have all sorts of theories about that, but I'm not going to examine them here. I'm just going to tell you the story of what happened. So, since the second syllable won, I said, okay, someone who voted for the second syllable, it won. So somebody say it with the heaviest stress on the second syllable. And from the back of the room came the voice of a young woman, a shy young girl. She called out, happiness! I didn't know. I wasn't thinking. I was just kind of vamping. I didn't know that would happen. And the kids freaked out. The laughing was so loud. Not just because that word came out, but that it came out of that very shy young girl who blushed bright red at that moment. Oh, I just could have died for her. But it was so funny. They laughed for so long that she kind of got over it in the same minute that it happened. So, I mean, it hit me how intense certain things can be. How, if you get just the right thing at the right moment, the learning is instantaneous. Everybody remembers it. I'm telling you, that's the first time I taught meter, and that's what happened. And from there on, when I was introducing meter, I used that word to introduce it. Not necessarily that poem, but that word. Because, let me tell you, kids don't forget it then. They know. They know that it does matter where you put the emphasis. The old joke used to be, I put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. That's the old joke. That is not as funny as happiness, okay? It just isn't. And that joke stays with them. That joke they remember. It's one of the few places where what I was teaching actually stuck, and the kids learned it in a moment. And every once in a while you have experiences like that as a teacher. they're less common in English than in math. There are moments in math where you teach something and a kid gets it and it's like the angels are singing, "Ah, I understand." But man, that moment, I was able to replicate it nearly every single time I taught meter to students. It was like magic. I hope you too, as a teacher, find some day or some lesson that comes to you like magic. And I hope you see me again, you gorgeous people.